Now, our demonstrator tonight is going to be Delahanty.
No accent on any syllable.
All right. From Mercerville, Virginia.
That's right.
And he's going to be turning spindles along with a few other things. And let's give Dennis a big hand.
You haven't heard me speak yet, so that's a little early. But my name is Dennis Delahanty. It's an Irish name. I happen to, because all my relatives are Irish, I have Irish citizenship as well. Percival, Virginia. Phone number's here. My email address is myname@gmail.com. If you want to write to me, ask me questions about anything we're talking about tonight, I'd be happy to answer your questions or send you pictures. Or people write to me all the time, would you do this? And they'll get back 10 pictures. And I'm like, great. We go from there. And if it happens to be anything you saw on the table, I can also fill you in as well. So this project sprung out of my idea to add something different to an open studio tour that sweeps northern Virginia, Loudoun County every year. And there's 3 of us on the tour that are wood turners, and I decided that I'd do something a little different. And I did 2 or 3 things that were a little different, and you learn the hard way sometimes. But I turned stools. Like I said earlier, my wife was kind enough to paint them all. And we wanted to add some variety. So you see 3 colors here tonight. Blue, tan, red, and a light blue over there. They're made out of 5 pieces. It's a 2-inch top you start with, similar to this. Glued up, this is a 3-piece. Usually I use 7. And I didn't say anything after the fact, but it involves spindle turning, but it also involves faceplate turning. And we don't have any faceplate turning because they put them through a machine that made them perfectly flat. So that we'll not have to do tomorrow, but that gives us more time to change the shape of the seat, hollow it out a little bit, taper the sides a little bit, put some beads on it, cut the corner off and put a cove in there. And this is probably one of the best examples of doing all those things. Get a little, cut it off with a 45, then just use a negative rake scraper that has a sharp round on it, and it gives you that. The bottom is just to hide the hole that we mounted on the screw chuck with. I used a piece of walnut. In hindsight, I probably would have painted it the same color as the seat, but I was being a little different. And we have 3 different sizes here tonight. This is a foot tall, approximately, from the top surface. This is 2 inches. We start with a 2x2, and the largest portions is 1 3/4, and the smallest portions are 1 inch. So there are very, very few dimensions to remember, except when you begin laying this out. We'll talk about that tonight. I'm going to start by talking about the top. I think this is a great project for beginners or masters alike because you get interested in learning how to use a story stick. A lot of people have never used one before. If you're doing tables, if you're doing stools, if you're doing chairs, you want those legs to look very, very similar from chair to chair to chair. And looking at it and then trying to copy it isn't as good as laying it out time after time just using a simple story stick. And there's a good article that you've sent out, I guess. I didn't write it, but she wrote an article on the story stick, and it's much better than what I could do. So including the article that I've provided and the tool list I provided, there's an article out there by another lady that did a great job with this. The nice thing about stools is infinitely variable. You can change the color, you can change the height, you can change the edge, you can change the detail on the legs to be from very, very simple to being very, very, relatively complex. And mine happen to be a little heavy on the top. That's just my preference. When you're turning it on the lathe, you can thin it down to whatever size you want. You just have to remember that as you thin it down, there's less place for the leg to go in and get a good solid grip. But if you glue it in, if your tenons are very, very well turned, and you fit them, I actually fit them to individual holes, then you can get a good glue joint on even just an inch. And these are in about 1 3/4 inches. So I like this a lot. It's a good starter piece. If you've got a person who wants to turn stools and they do the simple leg first, it's kind of like a bamboo leg. I use a little, I make people practice beads, and after they're done practicing beads, they turn into good handles for your burning wire. I try to repurpose a lot of stuff, and you can make it hard or easy. Of course, when you step up to the larger ones, you add a few more pieces. This one, of course, has 4 legs. This has never been finished. It's just right off from my class that I took with somebody. But these are, an additional item that you have to work on. You have to make sure your holes are drilled correctly on all 4 legs. They're a little different from leg to leg to leg, and that's where everyone learns the hard way. The angle of the legs on these is 16 degrees. The angles on the legs are these 12. They're spanning probably the same distance, but because it's taller, it's spanning about the same amount of footprint on the ground. And of course, on this one, you have to add another leg, and you have to add 4 more runners. And that's more pieces to turn that have a slightly different shape. So I just really found this to be an interesting project that incorporates a lot of different types of turning. I don't know if anything else you can do that kind of pulls it all together the way a stool does. And well made, I expect my stools, if they have not been crushed or burned, to be around 100 years from now. And I don't know how many things that we make that we can expect to be around and still in use as a real utilitarian item than a stool like this. So I kind of have that sense of, I'm making it today, I'll never see it 100 or 150 years from now, but I think that if this glue holds up, there's no reason why it shouldn't be still around. This one is got a top on it. My wife is a quilter, and she said, I'll do 3 of your stools with quilting on them. And after she got through the first one, that was the end of that story, because it has an awful lot of pieces on it. I forget how many, 20 some odd pieces, and with an elastic band on the bottom. But you can put it from stool to stool. And this one has a slight dish in it, has smoothed over edges a little bit, curled over, and that makes it look not nearly as heavy as one that has a solid top on it. So there's one more variation I'd like to show you. It's on, the short ones are 12. I can't go by the wire. Can someone give me that last stool? Thank you. Another variation is you can drill through the top and put a wedge in it. And that has a unique look to itself. I wouldn't do that to a stool that was going to be painted. This is just a really pretty effect to have those wedges, a dark wedge into that. And I just found some junk wood in my shop someplace. And, in a Windsor chair, for instance, the hole would be tapered for the stool, and the spindle would be tapered to fit the hole. And the more you sit on it, the more it jams one down on top of the other. So they actually get more solid the older they get. I just did a straight through. It does require you to put a sacrificial piece on your fixture when you drill, so you're not drilling down into your fixture, you drill into a cheap board. And then just you shape the end of it like you would any other. Let it come up about 1/2 inch too far, drive a wedge in there, and the wedges are driven so they're slightly wider, so these legs can never spin. They're locked in place. And you hammer it until you can't hammer it anymore. And always the wedges are 90 degrees to the grain. If you were to put the wedge in with the grain, you'd obviously split the wood. And yeah, you split the wood. But this way, they're always very, very, very stable. So it's a process. And I'm pretty process oriented. I come from a manufacturing background, mostly big stuff like Class 8 trucks and stuff with Volvo truck. So doing this kind of appeals to me. It's just a good fit for what I grew up with in my work career. And we're going to take you right through the process. First thing I want to do is talk about just gluing up and a few things that I've learned in the process along the way. I've got a few pieces here. Nelson and I unloaded the truck at his place this afternoon, and all the clamps got left at Nelson's. I apologize. But if, you know, if I could tell you a few things about each step that make it a better step, I think that is a good learning experience, and you can apply it to anything where you're gluing stuff up. Of course, if you're doing the centerpiece on a big round table, you would glue up pieces this way, and then you'd stack multiple pieces on top of that until you get a big chunk, and then you'd turn that down to, you know, you see these round tables with these big round centers, and so you just stack it 2 ways instead of just 1 way. We're using seven pieces total. We are going to end up with a stool that is 11 and a half, 11 and a quarter across the top when you get done. They've done a great job of turning the edges. I mean, a beautiful job of turning the edges, so there's not as much to do as I'd like to see. A little bit rough, it gives you more experience in turning it. But I start out by making sure that every piece, this were a perfectly flat surface, and I try to find that in my garage. I try to get a smooth surface on both sides. And if you push 2 pieces together and you get some of this fuzz along the edges trapped in between, it won't glue up no matter how hard you press it together. So put a little sanding block, 150 grit sanding block in your hand, do all 12 edges. So there's 4 here, 4 here, and 4 here. That way when you swap them together, they're going to stay very, very flush. The second thing I do is I mate it up to its adjoining piece, and if it doesn't mate perfectly flat laying on the table, one or the other has something wrong with it. So I begin checking it out. If you have you ran it through a pointer?
Yeah.
Is that how you get it perfectly square or flat?
Yeah.
Yeah. You could use a thickness sander, or you could use a pointer. I look at it, and usually when you look at the end of it, you can see, or use a micrometer on it, you can see one's end's a little fatter than the other. I just push it through a joiner and put some pressure on the fat side. And it takes it off, and put it back again, and it's either going to be correct or it's going to be worse. And you know you get it right. Put a little glue on this side of the first one, 2 sides of this one. Just keep laying it up and going across 2 sides, and then just 1 side on here. I put glue on both sides. I think it does a better job than just on one and hoping it gets stuck to the other side. I have these junk credit cards we get in the mail all the time. Just call us, sign up, and we'll give you a loan for $50,000 at 20% interest, whatever. You get those all the time. And I just squiggle it down and back, and then I put my card in the middle and pull it towards the ends. If I start down here, I feel like I'm going to pull some trash off the end and get it in my wood. And then I'm looking at it in the light, and there's all kinds of trash in it. But if I put it down here, also if you start in the end here, by the time you get halfway up, the glue's running over the edge. There's too much glue. So if you start in the middle, drag it that way, see if there's any place where there's missing on the edges, wipe it on, continue up, and get it nice and smooth. Do the other side at the same time, and if you've sanded those edges nice and clean, and it really doesn't matter if you get, you know, even if you had a small block plane and plane the edges, when you turn this, you're going to reduce the thickness of it. It can stand a 1/16 or even an 1/8 almost on both sides. You can lose, and it won't matter. Just any way you can do, don't worry about rounding off the edge a little bit. It's the section in the middle that's really important to get the glue on. The way I glue them up is I have pipe clamps like everybody has, and I also have some cabinet clamps. The problem with pipe clamps is when you get some pressure on them, the pipe bends this way. And when it does, your 2 jaws lean out. And when you're clamping pieces of wood, and I put a pair of clamps on the ground. Oh, this is important. I use press and seal all the time. I don't know if everybody has it in their cabinet or not, but press and seal is just a Glad product. And cellophane paper. Regular plastic wrap is not so good. And if you've got the pipes down here relatively close together, put this across all the pipes, especially when you're using pipe clamps. The glue is going to interact with the materials on the pipe clamp, and it's going to leave really black lines in your wood. Guess how I know that? And do that down there on the bottom side. So I got a pair on the bottom side, kind of out towards the edge, and I know that they're going to do this a little bit. So I put a second pair across the top. Now these pipe clamps, everybody's got 4-footers. I have 4 that are just long enough to get beyond this. That pipe you buy at Home Depot, if you buy a 6-footer, they'll cut it into any length you want. They'll thread the ends, and then you buy the little kits that you screw on the ends from Rockwell or somebody else. But put 2 on the bottom, fairly wide, or in the middle, it doesn't matter. Get out your handy dandy square, and I got Bessie clamps, so the clamps stand up a little bit higher than the edge. Put your square against the 2 edges, and make sure everything coming down the side is perfectly even. And you'll look at it and you'll swear that the block is perfectly even, but oftentimes it's not. And when you go to tighten that up, if it's askew a little bit, things are going to slide in directions you don't want to slide on. I put another piece on the top. I don't worry so much about the glue getting on this, because I just lay down a couple 4 pencils and put my clamps right on top of that, and it keeps it off the wood, and I can see better, a little bit better about what I'm doing. I tighten the bottoms fairly tight, not all the way. Put the top on, tighten them more than fairly tight, come back and do both sides until it's tight, very, very tight. Now that's after I have made sure that all these joints laid nice and flat before I glued them up. So that'll give you a really nice surface. You want to push these down hard on the bottom pipe. You want that bottom surface to be just as flat as you can get it. Because when you take it off when you glue it up, you're going to run it in the bandsaw, and you're going to put it on here with the screw chuck. And you want to make sure that that bottom, those pieces, fit very, very, very flat on here. You don't want any gaps. You don't want one piece sitting proud or anything like that. When you turn it on, you want this backside to turn around here and just be as straight as can be. You don't care about the front side. You can be off by ½ an inch, because when you turn it and you clean up the front side, you're just going to cut all that off. So, but get that bottom side of those pieces really flat before you, while you're putting them down on the pipe clamps or whatever pipe you're using. You can't stand them proud off from those bars. They have to lean right down on those bars, very, very flat. And that's why I start with a really flat surface to begin with. I have a piece of leftover granite that came from the cutout for a sink for somebody's kitchen. It works great. It's dead flat. I know it's going to be flat no matter which way I have it in the shop, and it works out real well. Now, as soon as it dries, through the magic of television, we'll move on to it all being glued up. He's playing the ones that you're going to use in the shop, whoever's attending the class tomorrow. This one I haven't. And you can see I've got some really variations on the top side, but my bottom side is very smooth. At least it's smooth on the first 3, because that's the width of the jaws. Once you get out on the edges here, it really doesn't care, because you're not going to be gripping it in the jaws of the chuck there. So I wanted to show you some layout, and if you would be so kind, I guess we can do it on a bit of an angle. So we're going to determine how much wood we can get out of this piece to begin with. And you do that just using a simple compass. I have here they are. Gentleman was selling off his shop recently, and I picked these up, and I'm like, oh my God, they're absolutely beautiful. So, now we haven't cut this round at all. So what I want to do is just find the center. So I worked on the centerpiece. There's an odd number of pieces for a reason, so that top dead center is going to receive a leg right in the middle of it, and everything else is going to lay off from that. So the first thing I did was I did a little work on this one. This one out here, and says, okay, what can I get from edge to edge, the largest piece? And then I know that I'm probably going to lose anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch to get that edge cleaned up later on. So we've got that taken care of. The other thing I do, that's about all I can get out of there on the bandsaw. The other thing I've done is found where the center is here, left and right, and I do the same thing up here on my line. And I do the same thing down here. I find the center. I'll tell you about that in just a second. The next thing you want to do is you want to lay out 1.5 inches in from that. So I had to estimate how much I was going to take off, plus 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches is going to be the center line for your legs. And if the line for the center of a leg is 1.5 inches in, the leg outside diameter, because it's 1 inch, is only going to be 1 inch off the side of the body of the. So here's your line. This is 1 inch in diameter. If you're in 1.5 inches, what wood you're going to have remaining on the outside of your stool is going to be 1 inch. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So the next thing I do is I go ahead and figure out, okay, I'm sure I can get that round by just taking off, because I've got full wood all the way around. I can finish getting it round. Ooh. That's why they're all rough. So I just ground off my pencil point. That's why I bring a can of pencils. We're just going to weigh out the diameter of the leg, and I'll show you what I do for weighing out the leg locations. It looks awful small. It's like, oh my God, my legs are going to be that far in. That's not a very big circle at all. And it's just fine, because the leg is not going to be all of it inside that. It's going to straddle the line. There we go for laying out the location of the legs. The next thing I want to do is, remember I told you I had a line up here and a line up here at the bottom in the center? I want to locate 6 locations that are equidistant apart around that circle. And you're only going to use 3 legs. Why are you using 6 locations? So let me show you real quick, at least on one side. That's the top of my... And it takes a few minutes to get this right. And instead of just having one point to check on, if you've used a ruler and a pencil from top to bottom, you only have to check 2 points. And that'll give you exactly, you don't have to go all the way around to figure out whether you're on track or not. My word, that's pretty close, just slightly to one side. So it has to be the distance that it's off, it has to be reduced by 1/3 of that. So just barely a pinch to get that to come over on the line. We'll try it again.
Dennis, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why are you gluing up so many pieces?
A solid piece is very likely to change shape with humidity and temperature. The more pieces you can, and when I'm gluing them up, when I'm cutting up a piece, when I cut them to length, I rotate them end to end. So they're not all growing in the same orientation. So I've got the pieces this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way. And I figured out that 5 pieces, you're more likely to have more movement. 7 pieces, much, much less likely to have more movement. That's the same reason why when they build these tables, these round tables, when they glue up the piece inside, they use 2-inch stock, rough sawn, they point it down, and everything's made out of 2x2 finished size. 5 is, I don't find 5 to be enough to really make sure that that chair is not going to do much. The pieces are wider. You're going to get a little bit of bowing when they do bow, and you'd want to see that multiplied across the piece. So if you flip them upside down and end to end, that's going to do a lot to make sure that they're going to offset each other going across the piece. That's going to be way too much. Yeah. I went too far.
Well, halfway in between.
Oh, not even that. Not even that. Just really just the tiniest bit on the front end. And it's going to multiply itself with each movement. That's it, right there. Yep, right on. So it didn't take but a minute to figure out where these locations were going to be, all 6 locations. And I'm going to take the point of my compass and just jab it in each one of those, just so I don't lose it, in case I lose the pencil mark. So now you can go, now all I do is I want to make sure that when I'm put it on the lathe and I'm smoothing those 2 surfaces, of course I'm going to cut all this off. And the way I prevent myself from cutting all of that off is just take a 1/8 inch drill, and just in the locations where I'm going to have the legs. That's my top dead center. This is top dead center. This is not going to be used. That's a leg. That's not a leg. This is a leg. That's not a leg. Don't make many mistakes in doing this too often. And you know, 3/8 of an inch, something like that. Those legs are going to go way down in there. So, thank you. This will be the pilot hole for the screw for the middle. Now, no matter how much material I take off from the backside, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to lose my orientation for the legs. It's fixed, and I could have drilled them down probably 1 inch because the diameter of the leg is going to be 1 inch. So if you went straight down in, you probably wouldn't be coming through the side. It wouldn't really matter. But that fixes where we're going to put the legs. Now, I've got a 3-piece here. I wouldn't have done it that way. This is just lying around the shop. I just wanted to show you, got to make some dust. Just wanted to show you very quickly what I do to put on the chuck. I have found that if you don't do something about getting it off, you may not be able to get it off. And oh, by the way, the next step is to put it through the bandsaw. And you know, what does everybody do with these things? Anybody tell? They go into your scrap bin when you cut something off the corners. Did all yours go into the scrap bin?
We did put shorter ones out here.
Yeah, sorry, good. I'm glad you brought that up. You don't have to have poplar that's really good material. It can be full of knots and crap. All you have to do is put the knots out here in the corners. You got 4 locations to put crap, you know, and you can slide it back and forth. Do not put a little piece up here and a little piece down here, because then clamping is a pain in the ass. It just, you got to have a full width to clamp it properly. But you can put all your crap out here in the corners, and it just it saves you a lot of wood and hassle. And you look at it and go like, I can't use that. But if you cut it right, you can use a higher percentage of your wood than if you just look for perfect wood all the way through. And these pieces in the corner, if they're made out of something that's nice, you can make a really pretty box that's for, this is a common pin box for those people that sew. This is a pin cushion. There's another place where you can put other types of pins or common pins. Probably you put your sewing pins up here and you put your common pins inside. So all this is scrap corners planed up, glued together, and I want to pass this around so everybody can see it. I didn't do that. Mike Frazier did that. He's a member of the Apple Valley Club. He's the treasurer down there. But his wife does a lot of stitching stuff, and in fact she demonstrates. And he's got a booth in the back of the room, and she says it's his stuff, her stuff for sale, but it's Mike doing all the. He saves the smallest little pieces, and he makes thimbles out of them, or he makes seam rippers out of them, or he makes, honest to God, the guy's got buckets and buckets. All my cutoffs go to his house if it's good material, and he turns it into, you know, a thimble. You know, he's talking like $12 to $18, depending on what kind of piece of wood. And it's this tiny, tiny little piece of scrap. And I think that one was, they do get exorbitant prices for that stuff, I gotta admit. And he's got some really nice detail on it. Take a look at his finishing and take a look at his just details to make it come out right. But all it is scrap corners, you know, so. He makes a lot of yarn bowls, so he ends up with a lot of corners. So So what to do with, we've taken care of the scrap. We're going to cut this off now with a bandsaw. And you don't have to be terribly accurate, just stay outside your line. If you stay outside your line, when you mount it over here on a big lathe or even a medium lathe, you're going to take all that stuff off. And we're going to practice on this one just for a minute. Have I forgotten anything in between? I don't think so. I think we've kind of hit on everything and we have to say about gluing up the seats. I was coming over to get my WD-40. I'm going to put it where it's not going to be seen. Just a little bit on those threads on the inside. Because I've been in a demonstration where I couldn't get it off the screw chuck. When it gets screwed in there tight, it's mean to get it off. So when you screw it on, you want to kind of keep an eye on it. What's that?
I'm looking at your screw. I put screws in her, face. Put a plate on the bottom and glue it on there, and put my picture on. But I see that there's a better idea there.
Oh, I've got a box full of those. I brought it with me, and when this comes up against that number 3 jaws on this stronghold, which are bigger than regular number 3 jaws, not going to go anywhere. And the other reason is when I can't get it off, if I've put a little bit of WD-40 on it, I got my trusty oil filter wrench with me, and but I've had to have some big. When I didn't have this with me, I looked for the biggest guy in the class and said, "Would you please come get this off the lathe?" So all we want to do at this phase is we want to true up the outside, and I want to show you how I get it trued up. I want to also show you every tool I have as I'm working on it. Okay, I don't want anybody to go, he didn't show me this or he didn't show me that. I have a couple of everything, so if you pass around my bowl gouge, as you can see, it's a normal Irish grind, and it's fairly swept back on a flat. If I want to put that down low, use that bottom edge, almost close the face of the bowl gouge. If it's less curved rather than more curved, it won't dig in as much. So the steep curve will leave divots easier. The long curve will span more grains of wood and give you a smoother finish when you're doing those scraping cuts, finishing cuts, I guess you would call it. And I usually have 5. I'm a tool junkie, I hate to say it, but when I'm working on rough turning bowls from green stock, sometimes that stuff can be really nasty, and I'll sharpen all 5 at once. It's very quick. I have a CBN wheels on my grinder, and everybody has kind of followed the philosophy of sandpaper with their CBN wheels. Like if you got 80 grit on this side, you got to go to 120 on that side, or 150. It's the old thirds. You don't step up more than a third of the previous grit number. So we got 80, 150, 240, 320, 400, 600, 800. Those are steps in thirds. You don't go any more than a third of what the previous grit was. And when people have been buying CBN wheels, they're using the same philosophy. And I'm like, why? You all use the 80 grit to get your gouge scraped, shaped. And you grind it once at 80, and then you go over to your 150, especially when we used to have stone wheels. You go over to your 150 and sharpen it. Well, with CBN wheels now, you can buy up to 1,000 grit. And I'm a strong believer that whatever you put on this edge is what's going to end up on your wood, and that's what you're going to have to sand off. If you've got if you use 45 grit, you're going to have 45 grit scratches on here, and you're going to have to use 80 grit to grind those scratches off. And you can't skip grits, or it's going to take you forever to grind all that crap off. So I went from 80 to 600. It is almost a polish. You can see it on the face of these. That's all I use. And what's the downside? Well, it takes me a moment longer to go from 80 to 600 than it does to go from 80 to 150 that first time. And I never go back to the 80 again unless I've done something terribly wrong to that edge. I just go back to my 600. So I'm putting a 600 finish off the tool on my work. And I found that I get a much nicer surface, especially when you're way down here at a 45 and you're almost close and you're doing that shearing cut just to smooth out that surface. You're leaving a 600 grit scrape across there. I just find that seems to make sense to me.
I have this at 600 bowl gouge.
What's that?
You have that bowl gouge at 600?
Yep. Yep. When you get to 1,000, it's a mirror finish, but you can still see the grit on these. Like I said, I have a fixture. I didn't bring it in because I wasn't going to have to sharpen anything, but I have a bolt, the adjustment for the Wolverine system. I have one arm for bowl. I've locked it down tight. I've drawn a line on it, and I've taped it. I don't want that to move. And I have another one for my spindle gouges, so that. And everybody says, well, what are you going to use? 2 inches or 1 3/4 inches? You know, how far am I going to stick this out beyond the fixture? And I chose 1 7/8. It's just kind of a. And he's looking across the edge. One thing I am very particular about. I was telling you yesterday that when I look across the top this way, when this back edge just ends up being the same level as this edge, I want the same thing to be happening on my grind. I don't want one side up and one side down. I want these two sides to be a mirror image. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I do look for that whenever I'm grinding. And if I see one's up and one's down, you can always take one down. And as you can see, it's a fairly smooth finish. There's people like Michael Sworge out there that his is raked back 2 or 3 inches, but he does these really weird triangles and, you know, turns them at 3,000 RPM and whatever. I don't need that. Let's see. I'm not going to go too fast. I'm not going to take much off. And this is very well in there. The other thing you can do, if don't ever leave a lathe running, if you're a little concerned up front, you know, first few cuts are not going to be on the outside edge, and even when you get in here at first, so you can always just put a little pressure on it if you're concerned about that screw coming off. Those screws will never come off, believe me, but if you are concerned about it, you can always put something against it. Always turn it down low before you Oh, yeah, that's right. That's not correct, is it? I use pretty much what comes with Powermatics. It's a black one. They did a knockoff of the one-way, and I pretty much use just the one-ways, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Do you know how a one-way becomes a drive center instead of a live center? If you want to do things like I do, which is turning special shapes to go on the end of my one-way, you want to be able to turn it on here, because if you turn it on something else that has the 8x10 threads and then move it over here, it's always going to be different. So you want to turn it on the tailstock that you're going to use. So these tailstocks have a hole through them, and it's made to walk up this jaws. And I just take a nail, which is approximately the size of that hole, drop it down in, let it sink almost all the way through. You can see it's almost out the other side. And put tape on it so it won't come out. Now I can put it in the drive center end, turn whatever I want on this, and I'll talk to you about this later. Turn this and get the shape I want, and then put it back in my tailstock, and I got a custom-made shape for this one. Would hold a sphere up to about the size of a baseball. In my case, we're going to be talking about holding the bottoms of the legs of the chairs. After you've potted them off, if you want to go back and do something on the leg, and you've got the bottom all finished, this little socket is perfect, and saves you the grief and aggravation of going, oh no, what am I going to do about that? Piece of cherry.
So you use a 3/4 inch tap?
I use I drill an 1/8 of an inch smaller, and then I tap it with a 3/4 inch tap. I have both of them with me. I have the one for the 1 1/4 8, and I have the 3/4 10. Goes on the tailstock. Sometimes I drill them all the way through. Sometimes, you know, if you don't have a chuck, you can always come over here and glue pieces on to this. This is nothing more than, I drilled it eighth of an inch smaller than 1 1/4. I tapped it. Now the first thing I did is I super glued it, thin super glue, hardened up that wood real good. I tapped it, and then I super glued it again. And I just want those threads to remain real hard. So I'll pass these two around. They may be sharp. And there's a lot of stuff I make just by tapping and putting on a custom shape on both the drive center and the live center. And that might be since you're passing stuff around, I have a couple other pieces here that are handmade that you may want to look at. A cone shape is the one I use a lot on my drive center. Nice thing about it is that it fits a lot of things. I don't know if any of you drill pepper mills, little grinders. This fits in the top really, really well. And if you get a catch when you're doing something down there, it just spins on this and it burns it a little bit. And all you have to do is, after you finish working with it, use your skew, shape the face again. And I make them long enough so I can come way back here. The dark lines are from the fact that if you're doing small spindles work and you want to burn a line in it, it's really hard on a small diameter piece of wood. You're there forever trying to get the wire hot. Preheat your wire on here, something bigger, step over to the small piece, and it burns it immediately. So if you're doing handles or something else, you want to do decorative pieces, preheat it, move over, it works right off quick. This is another cone shape that you can use in your drive center. If you're doing, you have to have a cone shape on both ends. That would be on one side, this would be on the drive side to turn spheres. And on occasion, you want something that's a little sturdier and you want to be able to go right off the end of the piece. And a lot of my drive centers are a little larger and you can't do that. You run into the threads or whatever. So I made a steel drive center out of just wood. So I'll just pass those around. And why don't you add that one to it. Someone in the back of the room collecting pieces for me, please. We're going to end up with a pile back there by the time we're done. But
You do want this back?
if you would, yeah. You know, if you're dying for it, except
This was the handout portion.
now, you may select from this one or this one to keep. So probably ask a lady which she likes better, and that'll be the club raffle item. And I'm happy to do it. So, yeah, I love this. Mike's so creative. Anyway, we were trying to turn some wood here. Turn the speed down, turn it on. I could have put that, we're not going to put that piece back on there. This is slightly out of shape. How many of you align your tool rest with a bedway? Almost everybody? If you, yeah, especially new people, the tool rest is always askew. And I'm like, if you're trying to turn something that's parallel to the bedway, you can't turn it on a tool rest that's not in line with the bedway. And all you have to do is look down across the top of it, and this one is off just by a hair. But just take that second, align your tool rest with the bedway. You can put your tool on here. As long as the cutting edge of the tool is facing in that direction, you can cut across there with your eyes closed, and it's still going to come out perfectly square. Just because you got your finger behind it, guiding it, if you don't push it in, don't pull it out while you're going across, it'll end up being nice and square. But please, go ahead and practice. So, hip, ABC. It's pretty good. I usually don't push it off the edge because it does tear out. Thank you. I usually push it almost to the edge, and then I come over here and just get that little bit. It's pretty good. Especially if you're going to be doing something to it later on by embellishing. Get it square first. Get this perfectly flat first. Get as much of the back as you can get, and that's right down to the chuck. And then we're going to turn it around. We're going to double face tape it to a piece of a faceplate. Push the tailstock up against it. Leave it for a while. Here we're going to put something heavy on it. If we find a block of wood or whatever, and leave it for a few minutes so that double face tape can glue into the wood on both sides and the faceplate. And then we'll take care of that little bit you can't get because the chuck's in the way. So now the second step is just to come across the face of it. And don't forget, our drill places are on the back side, so we're not going to, none of those holes, we've gone over those holes that would be in these locations when you come back here. I'm not going to go across these because the holes are 1 inch in size, and I just don't want a huge catch. You could do it wide enough, but this is pretty straight. The oh, there it is. When you get done, you want to make sure there's no gap in the middle, or no high points. And you want to do the same thing across here, especially across here, because when you put that double face tape on, you don't want this surface to be concave or convex. You want it to be very, very flat. And this is the face that's going to get the tape. So right now we have to go in there and correct a few lumps. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing it, but I'll show you. And a lot of people push their tool rest out here where they're not using it. And what happens is then you're doing a lot of cutting out here on this edge, which is thinner, and you're going to get more vibration. Put the meat of the tool rest where you're going to be cutting, and that way you're really going to reduce a lot of vibration when you're cutting. Again, just resting my finger and just a little bit of a little bit low on the tool rest. I'm not going to do this over and over again, but if I were home, I'd do it over and over again until I get that really flat. And you need it flat, just the size of the faceplate. It doesn't have to be real flat out here, but you want to get that 3 or 4 inches in the middle. I think I have a 5-inch faceplate, so you have to be 2.5 inches off here or 3 inches off the center, very flat. And I noticed that I've got a problem on both sides. I have a little bit of a high point in the middle, and I have a little bit of a high point out here. And I was talking about that shearing cut, about why I keep these relatively flat instead of strong curve on the face of them. I can't do much better than what I've done by pushing that bowl gouge into it. But I can take off really small, nice little feathers out here. And the nice thing about this cut is you can use it in both directions. Look at these beautiful little angel hairs of and I'm really not pushing it into the wood. I'm just letting the high points of the wood. And the further you can drop it down, the better the shear cut instead of a scraping cut. I like the finish you get. I really like seeing these things come off. If you're getting those things, you're doing a pretty good job of getting it as smooth as you can get with your bowl gouge. Let's check it again. Much better. Now, I've become a real supporter of scrapes. Some people do, some people don't. Especially the older gentleman I know, Don Maloney for one. I don't think he'd pick up a scrape if his life depended upon it. But I'm beginning to find that if I really want to save myself some time, especially like the inside of bowls and other surfaces, I'm beginning to use negative rake scrapers more. And I don't think I have another. Yeah, I do have another one here. The wider they are, the more growth rings they'll span. So if you get especially if you're using a negative rake scraper with a curved face, get a really tight curve on it, it's going to rise up over the growth ring down in the soft material, rise up over the growth ring. And if you can get used to buying, it's a little bit more expensive to buy it this way, a wider one, it's going to span 2 or 3 growth rings. So you're not going to get that it fall in the growth ring pattern. You're going to get it much smoother. So the trick to these are you're going to have about, this is sharpened. It's got a slight burr on one side. You can just barely feel it. And they're good for anywhere from 15 to maybe 45 seconds. That's all you're going to get out of them. I almost don't turn my grinder off. I have an extension on the bed of my lathe. I clamp my grinder out there. It's 2 steps away. I step around, put it on the table, back and forth just a little bit, bring that burr back up again. And the only time you have to switch it over is when they're getting slightly, you're working the edge closer to one side. You flip it over, you grind it a little bit, and then you go back to doing what you were doing. So, and the harder you push into the stone, the bigger the burr, the more wood it's going to take off. So there's that item to consider as well. You want to be dead center. Regular scraper, you would have to rise it up and have it pointed down, the ones that are straight across. Essentially what that does is that makes it a negative rake scraper. Then you, instead of having 2 planes hitting the wood this way, you're getting this effect, which is what a negative rake scraper is to begin with. But this one I'm not going to get any catches with. I can turn it up, I can take off small pieces, and it's the last thing I do because I hate sanding. I really hate sanding. So I found that, and again, it's just a very light cut. Just these little feathers. And I have a very slight curve on the face of this one. If you left it perfectly flat, you'd be fearful of getting the corners caught. That's ugly. But if you give it a slightly curved face, and this was probably a skew, when it started out, and I've just repurposed it into being a negative rake scraper. I'll take anything that looks like a bar of steel and turn it into a scraper. I have sharp ones to get into those tight corners in a bowl that comes down and sweeps in really sharply. And so we're getting better and better and better without having to lay sandpaper to it. And that's the whole point. And the other thing is we're trying to get everything knocked down so that when we put the tape on here, and I've got some problems out on the outside edge out here. And if you're doing something that this won't work, and this is your, you're getting tear out on something, and that's getting really, really close. But for our purposes, that's good. If you're still getting tear out here, either spray it with lacquer. I buy a shellac. Shellac, 10-to-1. I buy flake. I mash them up. I put it in alcohol, let it dissolve. Put in a little sprayer and spray it. And it'll dry pretty quickly. It doesn't take any time for shellac to dry. Or you can use water, or you can use, even a thin coat of glue. Anything to just get those fibers to get hard so you can go across them with a tool and they'll cut strong instead of just laying over and tearing out. So the more I turn, the more time I spend fine finishing with my tools, and trying to cut down on the amount of time I sand, and then a lot more time with finishes. And multiple coats, letting them dry overnight, being patient. Don't expect to have it in 10 minutes, expect to have it finished in 10 days. And then you can take it to a gallery and say, it's good, I know it's good, and then you can start jacking up your prices. So, let me show you what turning around looks like. I'm not going to turn it because of all that. Let's talk tape for a minute. There are all kinds of tape out there. If you pass this one around, this is what everybody goes out and buys and makes believe it's double-faced tape. This is carpet tape. You can buy from all the Home Depot stores and the carpet people and whatever, and you can believe it's working. I think it will hold rugs from moving around on the floor, or hold two pieces of rug together, but you shouldn't be using it on wood. You should use something a lot more durable. A lot of those have a paper backing. When you get the material off, do not use tape that's paper backed. Use tape that's cloth backed. And Lee Valley makes a tape. It's up in Canada. It's this material. It says made in Canada on the inside. And this is what we're going to be using in the class for the next 2 days. I brought this one and I brought a new roll. It's $26 a roll, plus $8 for shipping. It ain't cheap. But when you're buying it in quantities that I'm going to use it in, it'll last forever. And the other thing I do is I keep it in a Ziploc bag. It's got, the glue has solvents in it, or it wouldn't work if it dried out. So I keep it in a plastic bag so that keeps the shelf life up there. So, and smart ass that I am, I go online and says, well, this is made in Canada. It says right there. So I go online and look for all the other tapes I can find that says made in Canada. And sure enough, it has exactly the same writing in exactly the same place. So I buy this one for $15. And I'll tell you, you get what you pay for. This one is thinner, and if you can get it off the roll, and you can get it onto the faceplate, but trying to get this back sheet off is just next to impossible. You're picking at it, you're doing this. Some days I'm lucky and I can, other days I'm not so lucky, and I only use it on stuff that is not this size. I would not trust it to something that size. This is much thicker tape. It's really gooey, and that's why I don't just slap this onto the faceplate. I want to put some pressure on it for a while. You can peel these two back and you can just actually feel the ends, and there's a different thickness, there's a different amount of glue on it. You're welcome to play with both of them, but you really do get what you pay for. But this Lee Valley tape, haven't found it anywhere else, and I started asking people about it. And if you use this for this work, you know darn well that you can put a jewelry medallion on a scrap piece of wood and double face tape it, and you can do anything you want to the face of that, and it ain't going to come off. And anything that you're working with that you want to pull off and rotate and pull off and rotate, you can draw a line around the piece to make sure you got the outline, pull it off, turn it, whatever, especially if you're doing a convex surface and you want to put those grooves in it, like dancing figures or whatever they are. Double face tape has an awful lot of uses, and I'm using it more and more as I think of stuff. So if you pass those two around, don't scrimp when it comes to buying good materials. Beal buffing, the Beal company sells these. I'd advise you to buy them from them. I bought these elsewhere. You can buy these two taps from industrial supply houses like SMC or anybody else, Granger's or whoever, but they have them made just for woodcutters. And on the big one, it came in with a square shaft on it to mount into a real tap, a machine tap, and it won't fit my drill press. So I'm like, ah. So now I had to find a handheld tap holder to do this. And if you turn it nice and slow and you turn it nice and easy, it'll work just fine. And if you get it crooked, it doesn't matter. because once you screw it on, you get a flat surface. That's what a bowl gouge is for. Just face off, and it'll be just as flat as you need it to be, so you can correct the errors on that stuff. Let's see how easy this is to get off. Of course, that would happen, right? I did. And my chuck came loose. I just need to. Could you help me out? You hold the chuck, and I'll just give a pull on this. Thank you. That's okay. Get it all the way off. It's on there pretty good. I have tried a lot of chucks. Maybe I'd love to have a Vic Mark, but I can't afford them. So I found the second best is I think the Stronghold and the Talon from One Way meet all my requirements. Obviously, the back's open and the Vic Mark is closed. It's a sealed, so it doesn't get all the dust in it. This is a little bit more maintenance, WD-40 and an air gun and stuff like that. But let's go ahead. You know, I'm going to put it back on again. I want to show you something real quick. Like, what is he doing? I'm not going to do it hard. If I want to turn this around, and I want it to be registered right where it is right now, I want to put it on a faceplate. That's really hard to do. Even if you draw on here the diameter of the faceplate, the 5-inch faceplate, and you think you got it centered, and you can do that. You can come up with a point on the live center, stick it in here, draw yourself a circle that's this size, put it on here, and say, now when I flip it around and chuck the faceplate, it's going to be dead center. And if you get bowls and other stuff, you know it's a real pain in the butt. So you can find these out in the market here and there. All they do, I bought this one at Rockler. I probably should have left it on the shelf, but I had a demo I wanted to do. Then there's others that have the full length. I think Craft Supplies has the same thing, and it just goes into the MT2 taper. And then you spin your faceplate on it. Can I have some tape? The better tape, if you would. Just. Thank you. Doesn't take much. So that's all it takes. Let's see if I can get it started. Not that one. You know, it's never going to come off when you want it to, right? It's like waiting for paint to dry. Yeah, just trying to get that face tape off, and it's always a pain. We might skip it, but I want to show you what you get. So if you do this, run it up here. It's perfectly registered. It is dead on registered. And it's not going to go away. This tape, as soon as you push it up, put some pressure on it. I like to leave mine 10 or 15 minutes so they really get pressed together real well. But then you get this, what am I going to do now? Because this turns, but this isn't going to turn because it's walked into the M2T taper. So all you have to do is, and when you put some pressure on it, this is going to get walked into your MT2 down here. So you just take a little bit of pressure off of it. This one's stepping away, but if it were stuck, just a little bit of pressure off of it and knock that like that. Now it's free. Now you can back away. It's going to be on there, it's going to be in place, and all you have to do is turn this out of your faceplate. Turn your faceplate around, mount it on your chuck, dead center. And we do a lot of that oftentimes. You turn it around and suddenly you've lost another 1/4 inch on the outside of something. Or you had the wall thickness just perfect and now you've put a, if you're turning a bowl, what is the first thing you do? You turn the outside, you put the tenon on it, and you want to take it off, float it around in the space, and hope it's going to go back on again and a chuck on the other side, and it's not going to be aligned. So instead of putting a faceplate on there, put this in here, put a chuck on it, come up and grab your tenon on your bottom of your bowl, tighten it down, tap this away. Now when you turn it around, it's dead on. When you turn around, you're not going to have to remove a lot of material from the side because you didn't get it just perfect, or it didn't quite fit into the face of the other chuck. No matter what, it's going to be squared up. So this is kind of a neat tool. Again, I'd buy the one with a full MT2 taper. I'd probably send it in here a little bit more. I don't know if that's true or not, but it may be just my suspicion. So that's a way to get a perfect register when you turn stuff around on a lathe. I'm not going to turn that around. I was not going to turn that around and turn it anyway because we've got big holes in the bottom. But if I can pass on a couple of things you've never heard of before, I'll be a happy camper. Once you've got this side, you've still got your holes to lay it up in. We're going to just take 2 minutes to talk about can you take this out of here too? The fixture. This is a 16 degree fixture. This one happens to be 15.5 degrees. The tallest stools, again, take 12, and the bars take 8. And all I did was MDF, glued it together. I was using it this morning, and I was clamping a piece of wood on here. And I have no easy way to clamp it, so I have to put a piece of wood across the top, clamp it here, and clamp it here. I was tightening this down, and what I was doing, I was bowing this surface up and tearing it off the bottom. I looked at Nelson's, and he had glued it, and he used plywood, and then he also screwed it after the fact. His is not going to come out, so his is a better tool. So why 6 different locations on here? Well, I've drawn a line on my fixture, dead center. Centered it here, centered in the bottom, centered across here. I know that line is dead center between these 2 surfaces. When I throw this up here, I want this to be top dead center. Because if I put a leg on it, and it's not, this leg is going to splay out that way. If I put a leg on it that's not top dead center, the drill bit's still going to do it, but now it's going to be leaning out the right angle, but it's also going to be leaning over sideways. So you need this to be top dead center. And the easiest way to get this top dead center is draw a line from your point to here every time. This is not used, but run it over here, get out your little square, take a pencil, carry that line on the top down to the side, put that line on the side in line with the line up the middle of your fixture, and guess what? That has to be top dead center. That leg isn't going to be anything but perfectly splayed out correctly. And then I put my piece of chunk of scrap wood on top, like this, put a couple clamps on either side of it, and I drill. Loosen it, turn it, drill it, loosen it, turn it. And my leg, and the tough part, this is what I use. This is a Colt 1-inch brad point bit. When I bought it, it cost nearly $100. A friend of mine bought one recently on the same thing on Amazon, paid $23 for it. Now I went out to look for it as well. I can't find it. So I have a drill press where you can put stops on it. It's got the little arm that you can run the stops on. So what I do is I run, before I put this on top, I run it down to the height that I want to leave the thickness in here. So if I want to leave a 1/4 inch between the top, 1/4 inch is plenty. It's not going to break away. And I want to get this as deep as possible to get as much leverage down in the hole to keep that leg from bending ever. And all I do is I run it down as far as I want, and if I want it to be 5/16, I get out a 5/16 drill bit, like this one. I put the bit, don't forget, the bit, everyone can see that? It's going to hit the uphill side first, and it's going to really rattle this bit around. It's going to make a lot of noise in the headstock of your drill bit. But if I want it, that's the side that you have to measure. So just take a 5/16 drill bit and just slide it under and then lock your position so it can't get any deeper than that. And then what you want to do is you want to lock the top side so it doesn't get too far away from your top of your stool base, so that you can make sure that you run it down and get that point just as close as you can to that little drilled out hole that we made earlier. If it's way up in the air, you have to kind of pull it down, and you're trying to adjust it down here at the same time that you're by moving the whole system, you're trying to adjust it, and that's a real pain in the ass. So if you walk it up and down, up so that it doesn't get too far away from the surface, down so it doesn't go through too far. And then the last thing I want to tell you is we put 2 pieces of wood on here instead of just one. One would be perfectly good to capture that seat. No problem at all. But when you want to drill through, the only way you can drill through without messing up the top of your fixture is by putting a sacrificial board under there. When you do that, now your stool's up here. It's still caught perfectly dead center, but now you're off and you can drill straight through and not harm the surface. So I put a stop to end up someplace in the sacrificial board. So it goes through, cuts that. I've got a lot of pressure on this so it doesn't tear out these edges at all. You can see there's nothing torn out here. I didn't do a lot of sanding. You just clamp it down tight and it'll go through and it'll be very nice. I think we have worn out seats.
All right, does anybody have any questions before
We go on the legs.
we close?
Sir,
How much time we got?
Oh, well, we mostly quit around this time, but if we go by our regular time at 9 o'clock, we've got 10 minutes yet.
Well, there's a
were
lot.
you a toolmaker before you were a woodworker?
No, I'm just anal.
Great.
Yeah, I'll admit it. You know, I have my faults too. That way, we want to take a few minutes, and we've got to take a few minutes and talk about the legs and how to use a memory stick. This is so easy. Put this between centers. Get this out. Hold it up to the edge, and then draw these marks that aren't here. You got it from somebody else. Just copy it or have them give you one or whatever the case is. I'll show you really quickly on one of these stool legs what I mark out first. I mark out this position, and this position. Those are very, very strong, and I come off from those. Lightning bug, no more. You have to turn a 1/4 round on each side of these, with one exception. This one comes up onto the high point here and goes back down again. This is a 1/4 round, that's 1/4 round, 1/4 round, 1/4 round, 1/4. So marking those places is really important to begin with. So if I lay this out on a regular stool right here, let's use this one. I've got end, and that is the dead end of this piece. I come up 2.5 inches to the first what I call bird's beak. This is kind of a bird's beak shape. If you look at that fashion, it kind of looks like a bird's beak. It's got a rounded top and it's got the other side of the bill. So 2.5 inches up here, 1 3/4 inches to this one, and 5 inches to that one. Those are the 3 that I mark all the way across the stick. The next thing I do is I mark 3/8 inch out on both sides, because that's where you want to begin these rounds into those locations. Those are 5 more ticks, 2 here, 2 here, and 1 here. The next thing I do is mark highs and lows. I know that 3/4 inch off the end, this is going to be my high point. I know that 3/4 inch off from this surface, that's going to be my low point. So I actually put a tick on here and I put an L and an H. So as I come across, I have those clearly laid out. And then last but not least, I'll take I was going to show you tonight, we're kind of getting late, but I was going to take a diamond parting tool, and every place that I have a low, now high, I know it's going to be this height. It's going to be my full thickness all the way up to, or just, we're starting with 2 inches worth of wood, we're coming down to 1 3/4. So you're going to have a little bit, but turn it round all the way down. Use the skew to cut these locations. Nice deep groove. Down, this side, down again, this side, that side. That fixes those. If you put a pencil mark on a page and you say, okay, go ahead and turn quarter beads down into that hole at that pencil mark, I'm always going to be left or right. But when I use a skew to cut down in here, it's a 1/4 inch, it isn't really much. I can hit that every time because it's a very, very, very solid place to stop. So I go ahead and skew those down in place. They're fixed, I know what's going on. And the low portions, the high portions, all you have to have is a pencil mark. When you're shaping stuff, don't cut off the pencil mark, leave it there. Sand it off later on. You're gonna turn this down, but it's going to be a 1/16 strong. Leave your pencil marks on the high points until you sand. On the low points, take your 1/4 inch, your diamond, there it is. Take your diamond parting tool and cut down where it says low. I know these are 3/4 off from here, they're 3/4 off from here. These happen to be 1 inch, this happens to be 1 inch, and that happens to be down 1 1/4 inches. At the low points, I go ahead and just part right in. Now I don't do it to all of them, because if I did it up here, you begin to get wobble in it because you've taken away a lot of diameter and strength. So I'll do the first one, and I'll sweep this down in, I'll sweep that one down in, then I'll come and do this one. But I'll bring this parting tool down to within a hair of 1 inch. That gives me a place where I can cut down to on the bird's beaks, and I can bring this. Don't forget, this is convex and this is concave, so it's a multiple curve in here. Not easy to do nicely every time, but if you get a low spot that you know that's where you have to end up being low, both left and right, and since this is a really short design, you have to come down pretty steep from these, almost straight to begin with, and just sweep over into that low spot. And that very last cut to the bottom of the low spot, and that'll leave those locations spot on every time you go after them. And you can make mistakes. You can't make much mistakes between here and there. It forces you to stop your points right here and here. And these skew places have done the same thing. And this one you come up like 1 3/4 inches, and the rest of it has to be a straight dowel. When I go to put the legs in the seat, I've got 3 holes. I turn 3 different legs for 3 different holes. So I turn it, I take it off, and I want to check it. And I want to make sure that I number the end of this one, and I number that one. And I make it fit that hole perfectly. And then I'll do it for the next one and the last one. So I'm never confused about what hole it came from, because when I go to glue up and I mix them up, if I didn't number them, one wouldn't fit and one would be loose. So I number them when I put them down in. Now I told you about my wife volunteering to paint stuff on me, right? So she's painting and it's like, I said, don't get any paint in the holes. And she's like, that's too damn hard. So she painted it all, and she had drips running down in here, and the inside was, and you got to paint 2 or 3 layers. Do you know how much thickness 2 or 3, or, it's once around you've thickened the paint twice. Twice around you've thickened it 4 times, and with a drip in there, the legs never fit after that. So I can't tell you how much time I spent scraping the paint off the inside and sanding those to get them down inside. So do a little masking. Stick it down in, and even if the paint isn't quite all the way there, come in and touch up after you've glued your legs in place, and that'll really make a big difference. This is all milk paint. This is all general finish. I've got 5 different colors we can use tomorrow. This one happens to be brick red. It happens to be that red right there. And I brought paintbrushes, which are just foam paintbrushes. Some of you have used this. It's a dry powder. It's the real original milk paint. You have to mix it in warm water. You have to skim off the big particles that float on the top. You have to use it pretty quickly. And when it's on, it'll smudge off on your clothes. General wood finishing will not smudge off on your clothes, but it will smudge. If you run your hand or blue jeans across the top of it, it does smudge. The way to take care of that is use Krylon. Where is it?
Water bottles.
Yeah. This is Rattle Can, Walmart, Krylon matte finish. Just spray it on. Did I bring in? Yeah, I did bring in a fixture. Take these outside. This stuff dries in like 5 seconds. Build yourself a really, really technical fixture. Stick your legs down in it. You know, the spindle portion down in the top, portion that's going to go in the seat. And then spray each side twice. So once, 2, 3 around, once, 2, 3 around. So I paint all, I got 8 or 10 here. I paint this side, and then I paint all this side, and then I come around the back side and paint them all. And do it outside where it's really, really strong. Do it outside with the winds blowing, something like that. And then come back and, you know, by the time you walk 5 steps that way, come back 5 steps, it's dry. And you can put another coat on. So just put 3 coats on, and that will keep your paint from smudging. I mean, my grandkids have been playing with these things for a long time, and you don't see, now you do see scratches, which I can repair pretty easily with a light sanding and put another coat on of paint, and then spray this on top of it. It'll be good for another set of grandkids. But the last thing we have not talked about is the button. That's nothing more than a mushroom. If you can turn a mushroom, you're all set. Turn the mushroom so that it's 5/16. That's the hole we drilled in the base for this screw. Just a slight cap. Don't thin it to the edges, because don't forget it's end grain. And if it's going in this way, you want the stem to be strong, but those edges out here on the edge of the cap are going to be weak. So leave it thick, dome it, but leave it thick all the way out to the edge a little bit so that they don't just break away. And that way you can put a piece of cloth on it, tap them down, put a little glue on it, tap them down in. So put a board, a piece of cloth, a board, tap them down in so you don't scar the top of them. And I pre-finish them on the lathe before I even cut them off with just a little saw. We covered a lot of ground tonight. Tomorrow we'll do it in a little bit more detail. I brought enough blank sticks, so we'll all transfer to the sticks. We'll spend a lot of time turning legs because that's where the turning is. Nelson was kind enough to eliminate most of the turning on the top, but we do have to drill holes for the legs. And we will lay out that pattern. We'll pre-drill it, and we'll put it on top of the fixture and get the legs placed as well. And if you'd like, you can also take the template off from these legs if you'd like to try that. I brought D-Way's beading tool. If you've never had an opportunity to do beads, you can do these beads by hand. It's kind of hard to use a spindle gouge out here. This is a big surface to be trying to get beads turned on. So what I typically use is just a, I don't know if anybody has here seen a point tool. All it is a steel shaft with, find a skew here and I'll take care of it. We'll talk about other techniques tomorrow when we have a little bit more time. This is just a point tool. It has 3 sides on it up to a very sharp point. Just put it on the grinder, and these 3 sides are equidistant from each other. Does anybody know how to get them equidistant or keep them equidistant?
Just pick up the board.
No,
You get a flare fitting that's the same diameter as the shaft. You have to drill it out, that's okay. Put a set screw in it, and you screw that, and you put a little flat on your thing, and then you put it on your...
Yeah, right, tool rest, and you have it.
You flip it every other flat on the flare tube.
There is another way.
Okay.
Drill out a nut until it swips over. Tape one side of the nut, and that'll give you your 6 sides. And you use every other side on your tool rest. Just lay it down, and it's going to come out perfect every time. And just swip the nut off to get out of your way. Some people actually even glue them in place with something. But I know that a nut with 6 sides will give you that perfect 3-sided thing
But
on
once
your
you
point
do
tool.
it, then how do you get it the next time? That's why I did the
That's right.
flat.
If you do a flat someplace, it will stay,
Yes,
either on here or someplace else.
right.
The way this works is you jam it in, it gives you the portions of the round, but then turn it slightly and use it like you would a negative rake scraper to come around the top of the bead. And then do the next one, turn it and drop it slightly to come around the top of the bead. And then sandpaper will take care of whatever else you need. This one was done that way. I didn't use a beading tool, I didn't have a beading tool. And tomorrow we'll play with a D-way beading tool, or we can cut coves, or we can do whatever else you want to do on the tops. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And would you be so kind as to pick the stool the club will keep?